and I'll go ahead and get started. I'm probably the only person who knows everybody here, at least by name. Anyway, Destiny, I'm not sure you ever heard me pronounce my name. It's Alina.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've actually been Destiny's mentor, writing mentor for maybe 3 or 4 years now. Is that about right? Something like that? Just thinking. Anyway, so I'm going to just open up the program. We expected a few more students to be here. I'm sure they'll catch up with us at some point, if not today, that at other sessions. But quite honestly, I'm excited to be here for the discussion that we're going to have today. And I'm sure that everyone else is as well. We're going to take a few minutes to go around and just introduce ourselves to you. And again, everybody knows me. I'm Alina.
I'm Tanya Carter.
I'm Kate McCarthy. I'm Janae.
I'm Denise DeVries.
And I think we have you and Alice introduced.
Oh, Alice Cooper.
Yeah, and of course I'm Destiny.
Janae actually is one of my students from the high school. And so I was happy to see you walk through the door. And not in the classroom. It's actually nice when you're not in the classroom. So, this is the launch of our Young Writers program. I think we've been calling it, wow, why am I
Speaking Our Minds.
Speaking Our Minds Writing Program. And today you will be our very first guest, Destiny. We are expecting we hope to have up to 10 teenagers who are actually involved in the program. The library staff, they did introduce themselves, but Tanya's on staff, Kate's on staff, and Denise and I actually are not on staff. And Janae actually comes in and volunteers on Tuesday and Thursday, is that right? Yeah. So Destiny is a freshman at the University of Lynchburg. She's a recent graduate of Gloucester High School. And as I said, I met her, actually not in person, we've only met this way, but we've been working together for almost 4 years now, if not 4 years. And we're gonna have a conversation today about how she got started writing, what the goals are and that kind of thing. And then we're gonna open it up for questions and answers. Okay with everyone? Mm-hmm. Okay. You wanna get started, Destiny?
Yep.
Okay. So Destiny, can you talk to us a little bit about how long you've been writing and how did you get started?
I've been writing for about 2 to 4 years. And it mainly started because I started writing fan fiction on different sites and whatnot. Not sure how many of you actually know what fan fiction is. It's kind of made up stories by people all around the world who just have a liking towards a certain show or movie or whatever. And I started doing that. And well, it was kind of fun. Of course, I didn't know what I was doing. And some of the stories that I made at that point is probably just trash, but it was fun and kind of made me realize that I liked writing a whole bunch.
What's your favorite type of writing?
I'd have to say that fiction tends to be my preferred style of writing, and specifically fantasy and science fiction. It's just fun for me to come up with new ideas and outlandish ideas and situations that could occur if magic or insane levels of science was actually real in today's world. It's just nice to make something new and to change something that's ordinary into something amazing and fantastical.
Fantastical. I remember when your dad first approached me at the 7-Eleven, and he said, my daughter's a writer too. And I said to him, wow, that's fantastic. I'd love to read something that you wrote. Little did I know that you were going to turn around and run with that. And in no time flat, I think either you had sent me a file via internet, or, well, definitely the next thing I know, there was a brown envelope being handed to me at the 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
What was that story?
I believe that one had been the like original like Frost story before all the edits and whatnot.
I think it was Frost. Yeah. Just I know this is off track a little bit, but why don't you tell us a little bit about Frost?
Well, Frost is kind of like a sort of mystery adventure kind of story that involves magic and anthropomorphic animals. And there's like 4 main characters in the story: Lucky, Willow, Belle, and Prowler. And the first book kind of is like, you know, them running into one another and getting the story rolling with like the entire mystery.
And they actually ran into each other because of this supernatural frost.
Snowstorm, basically.
Yeah, that was occurring. Just tell us just tell them one thing about Lucky that you like.
Repeat that?
Just tell them one thing that you like about the character Lucky.
Well, he kind of is like a representation of me, especially when I was younger. Just really naive and not wanting to believe that the world can be cruel, or that other people in the world just aren't like nice or kind-hearted and whatnot. And it was just fun writing from like an old perspective that I used to have. Like, of course, I'm still fairly naive, but I've more or less accepted the fact that the world is not exactly the best place, and that some people just aren't going to be sunshine and rainbows.
And my favorite character in that story probably is, I want to say Willow, but she's such a one. Willow is a one. And Lucky's a wolf.
Fox.
He's the fox and Prowler's the wolf.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Willow's a hummingbird, and she's a busy bird, and she has quite the attitude and temperament as well.
Yeah, grumpy characters are my forte.
What'd you say?
Yeah, grumpy characters are my forte.
So, do you remember the first piece that you wrote?
The first piece that I ever actually wrote down would have to be like an old collection of short stories I wrote when I was like 8 to 10 years old. I wound up giving them to my tutor, and honestly don't remember what any of them were about. The only thing I really remember is that for whatever reason, my young self was like, oh yeah, with my limited grammar skills, I'm sure she can totally read what's actually on the pages. That's ignoring the fact that my handwriting could probably suck. But nevertheless, I gave it to her, and she probably still has it to this day.
You think she does?
She probably does.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about how you come up with ideas. I mean, I know that you mentioned, you know, the type of characters that you like, but beyond the type of characters that you like, how do you come up with these storylines? Because they're really out there. I mean, I think some of this audience read The Loving Dead, so they know a little bit about what I'm talking about your storylines.
Yeah. Like, most of the time it kind of just comes to me. Like, I'll be like working on something, or I'll be in the shower or whatever, and then an idea will like come to me, And that's honestly happened like a multitude of times. Like, Eleanor can attest to that. Like, I have an actual list of ideas that I hope I can eventually get to in my lifetime. But nevertheless, whenever I come up with an idea, I open a Word document as soon as possible and just start jotting down all the ideas I have in bullet points. And the bullet points will like detail like the setting of the world, the plot, any sort of world building facts and tidbits I have, and the names of the characters and what personality they'll have. And of course, when it comes to the personality, it just takes a minute for me to come up with like a good sort of personality for them that I believe that fits. But it works out.
How many stories do you think you've written so far?
I've like fully completed and written 2 stories thus far. Frost and the Loving Dead, and I'm currently working on 3 other stories, called Breathless, Checkmate, and the sequel to Frost.
And you scratched the one that was going to be called Exterminator.
Oh yeah, Exterminator was originally gonna be like Breathless, but considering how close Exterminator was to like actual real life events involving the pandemic and whatnot, I was just like, yeah, I'm sick of the pandemic and I just don't want to deal with that in my writing right now.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. And I did see that the pandemic was in there, and I was like, oh man, you still want your fun writing to not have to always be
Mimic life.
mimic life, what's going on. So I asked you a couple of minutes ago about your favorite character in Frost. Can you take some time though to tell us about more of your characters and how you go about creating them?
Sure. Another one of the characters that Eleanor mentioned before in Frost is Willow. She's very temperamental and hot-headed, and she just doesn't take no from anyone. And there is a nice side to her, but it usually takes a minute to actually get to that nice side. And even then, if you've kind of like given her a reason to hate you, it's gonna take even longer. Like, she's probably gonna hold a grudge against you for life. And then there's Dennis, another character of mine. He's from the story Breathless I mentioned before, the one I'm currently working on. And he is and he's like very cheerful and patriotic. Like, if he gets on your side or believes in a certain cause, then he'll believe it and like throw himself fully into it for basically as long as necessary, unless something occurs that like makes him realize that whatever he believed in or whoever he believed in just isn't as good as he thought. And Dennis, and this is like one of my favorite traits of him. He's like incredibly indecisive. Like, he can make like big decisions pretty good. Like, he's able to do that fine. But if it's a small decision like what he wants to wear or whatever, that's what he struggles with. And I find, and I don't know why that's my favorite trait that Dennis has, but I just like it. And then there's another character called Momo. He hasn't been like written in any of my stories yet, since his character is on one of the stories that I have yet to write, just the entire list of stories I got. And he is kind of like a grumpy Santa Claus. Like, he's very grumpy and upset most of the time, but has an almost childlike sort of whimsy to him that makes it hard to take him seriously. And when making these characters, the main thing I did was just think. Like, I imagined how they'd look and what their personalities would be, and I just played with like different ideas on how they could act and what traits they would have. And usually when I like start writing these characters, their personality is the right fit, and I can get into it. But sometimes, but like rarely, that isn't the case. The most recent example is with Dennis, where Eleanor and I both agreed that he was too emotionally immature at the time of how at the time, like given how his personality was designed. So I tweaked it a bit so he would be more peppy and cheerful, and thus kind of balancing out any sort of immaturity you might have with the charm of just being happy. And the and the and creating characters is just really fun for me, especially when I can, especially if I just for whatever reason start to relate with them, and just get into, and it helps me like get into their heads and understand how they would react towards a certain situation and what they would think. It's just nice overall.
So where's all this going for you?
Hmm?
Where's all this going for you? So, in other words, so you're writing short stories. What's your plan for the future in terms of your writing?
Well, I plan on I plan on like just becoming a journalist and a novelist. I know that being like a writer in of itself isn't exactly a money-making job unless you're like the next J.K. Rowling. So for me, it's like I'll be like a novelist and stuff, while at the same time like being a journalist. Because another thing that I like is like just being involved in the and being involved in like the writing and editing process for like newspapers and whatnot. I figured that out in like high school because of my journalist class, and besides, even if journalism in of itself isn't the one thing that I root for, at the very least, I can like still write and whatnot in the future when I'm at work, and that's mainly what matters. Just writing has always been like entertaining for me, and I suppose as long as I'm writing, I'll always have fun.
Yeah, I do. And, yeah, I would agree with you. Denise writes as well. You have fun?
Yeah, I don't do it if it's not fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely fun. So what suggestions would you offer to Janae or any other young people who are interested in writing, thinking about writing, not sure how to get started, that kind of thing?
The best advice I can give you is just go for it. Like when I initially came up with Frost, I had the idea, but of course I didn't really consider myself a writer per se, so I just wasn't sure what to do with it. And my dad told me, well, just write it and see what happens. And that's what I did. So if you have like an idea or whatever, just go for it. Like just write what you can, even if your writing is total garbage, like mine had been back then. And if that's what you're into and that's what you like to do, then you'll probably like want to do it more. But if that's not the case, then at the very least you'll get a book you'll get a book at the end of it that you'll probably be able to publish once editing is done.
Is there anything that you've mentioned editing twice? Any last thing you want to say about editing?
Yeah, editing's pretty important, especially if you don't know what you're doing. Like when I started, and again, Eleanor can like agree with this, I had no idea what I was doing. Like any sort of grammar like grammar rules that would exist in like books and stuff I was not aware of, so I just went ahead and wrote what I wanted to write, even if it didn't grammatically like work.
You have a different appreciation for that now, right? You have a different appreciation for that now, though, right?
Yeah. Like, I'm glad you like taught me like all the grammar rules and all that, so that my writing can actually be like read.
Okay, well, I want to open it up to questions now. Anybody want to ask Justin anything?
I have a question. When you started with fan fiction, were you on bulletin boards and did you chat with other fan fiction writers at all?
Not really. Most of the time I just didn't chat with anyone because of personal reasons. There's only one person I can really think of that I chatted to on a daily basis that I'm still in contact with, but we mostly just say hello to one another and whatnot.
So is there a social aspect to your writing at all, or is it just something you do on your own?
Repeat that?
Is there any social aspect to your writing, like belonging to a group or sending it to certain people for feedback?
Not really. Like, with me, it's just like, I like writing, and this is something that I always struggle with. Like, I always like worry about like telling too much about my stories or like just giving away too much. Cause I just worry that the idea might be taken or something. I know it's silly, but man, I worry about that. And for me, writing is just about enjoying the feeling of just writing and creating something.
Destiny, are you an avid reader as much as you are an avid writer?
I don't read as much as I write, but I definitely enjoy reading. I'll like read just about anything. Well, besides nonfiction stuff, I tend to not like nonfiction, but I'll read just about anything that catches my eye. And in fact, in my room, I currently have like an entire box of books that I've like read over the years, and some of those in there I probably haven't gotten to yet. So at least I have something to read while in between college work.
Yeah, do you feel like what you're writing is something like that you wish you had? Does your writing fill a gap, like something that was missing that you wish that you had as a reader? Does that make sense?
With me, it's like, yeah, writing does kind of fill in like the void and stuff, because whenever I read like a book, I can like guess what the writer was probably thinking at the time, or what their thought process was, or I can understand that they probably like went through a lot when it came to like writing out certain parts, or just coming up with the idea entirely.
I have a question. So, Destiny, you probably don't realize it, but when you talked about your characters, you had like big smiles for some of them. So, I know that they're a figment of your imagination, but were they based on some people that you know? Because it almost like you have reflective memory because you just smile so hard on a couple characters.
Yeah, like some characters are like inspired off of real life people. Like I mentioned before that Lucky was kind of like based off how I used to be, and Willow and Willow especially, like this technically goes for any grumpy character, but Willow's like the outlier. She's kind of based off of my grandma, because my grandma is just she's nice, but at the same time she can be really bullheaded and is just super stubborn. And if you make her mad, pray to God, because that's the only thing that can save you. And and my grandma has been like a big influence on my life. So I guess that's why I kind of like grumpy characters, because while they might not seem all that friendly at first, there is a nice side to them that they'd be willing to show once they are able to trust the person or get to know them. And besides, I've always found grumpy characters amusing, and I guess it's mainly because of my grandma. She just rubbed off on me, I guess.
Shanae, you have a question? You good? Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Oh, Alice has a question.
So, Destiny, now that you're in college, are you working on the school paper or looking into that kind of activity or other journalism activities or thinking about it?
Yeah, I've been thinking about joining this one newspaper like group in my college. It's like it's like kind of like the school newspaper of sorts. And I've been thinking of like joining it. Just gotta make sure I remember to like ask about it and whatnot.
This is your first semester, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so there's a lot coming at you, I imagine.
Yeah, like right now, everything's like pretty chill at the moment because I basically got all my homework done and whatnot. But it's probably gonna ramp up in a minute because exams are kind of on the way.
Kate, you want to ask one more thing?
Oh yeah, I loved how when you were discussing one of your characters' personality traits of indecisiveness, I forget exactly his name.
Dennis.
Dennis. And you had a big smile and you're just like, I don't know why I love that trait about him, but I just do. And it made me think that like it adds layers of nuance to a personality. Like it's so much more realistic when a character is not just this way or not just that way, when they kind of are like, oh, I don't really know, or displaying traits that like we all experience. And I was wondering if that's what you felt when you were describing it. It feels real to you, like because of.
I guess a part of me like kind of relates to that trait of his, because like sometimes when I'm like writing something or I want to write something, I'll come up with this idea and I'm constantly going back and forth as to whether or not this will be a good idea. And I'll be like laying in my bed for like 30 minutes, an hour thinking it over. And sometimes I'll need to ask Eleanor what she thinks because she knows more about the writing process than I do. And, you know, she'd be the best person to give out the advice. And then sometimes I'll actually be able to come up with the decision myself. But in a way, I can be a bit indecisive when it comes to certain ideas because I just want to make sure that it's a good idea to begin with.
Yeah, it's relatable. It makes the character relate to you, and I'm sure the people who are reading it.
Yeah.
I had another question. Do you ever have a character really surprise you and do something that you weren't expecting?
What about Prowler?
Well, yeah, Prowler was a bit of a surprise with me because when I initially started writing him, I wasn't sure if the redemption thing would work. Because the problem with like modern shows and whatnot is that they often try to redeem like the most vile characters in the history of ever, and I'm just like, why would you try to just make this character a good guy when that's clearly not how that would work for them? And I guess with Prowler, the main reason it worked was because I kind of had the idea of redemption in mind, and that he's a kid, so even if he does do something like bad, it's more or less like he just isn't developed enough mentally to kind of realize how bad his actions are, and that with him there's a more likely and more realistic chance of him actually turning over a new leaf. Because with children, it's like they're kind of like malleable, and whenever they see something or experience something, it's kind of like, and the after effects on them is very clear. So in a way, with Prowler, it's kind of like the surprise came with the fact that I actually like managed to do the redemption arc well, and on top of the fact that it was just surprising to see how much Prowler like grew and changed throughout the book.
Yeah, but there was another character who influenced him, who like really softened him up. We're still talking about Frost 2. Who was that character?
It was kind of a combination of it was overall, I would have to say Belle was the one that softened it up the most. Like Lucky was kind of like the one to kind of break the kind of like to shatter that shell of his, and Belle was the one to completely shatter it. And this is something I did mention to Eleanor before, but there's like an actual reason why Prowler would be more susceptible to like Belle, because like in the book, Belle has a very motherly sort of attitude and is very kind and like and is very kind and understanding, and she cares about others around him. And Prowler has never actually experienced like a mother figure or any sort of kindness, because in his like backstory, he was like raised in a pack where everyone just treated him like trash. So when Belle came along and just started acting motherly and kind, it kind of lowered and made it easier to break into that shell of his and kind of bring out the person he actually was.
Any other questions? Destiny, I want to say this has been fantastic. It really, I'm so excited. If you're open to it at some other point, if you want to come back and think about talking to our group as it grows, that would be fantastic. We appreciate you today, most definitely. And I'm looking forward to going back and listening to some of this interview again, and I'll make sure that you get it as well, okay?
Well, I'm glad I did a good job.
You did.
Thank you.
Very good.
You did. Okay, you could stay on, or you could take off if you want to. It's up to you. But thank you so much again, Destiny. I'm sure I'll be talking to you in a couple of minutes.
I'll see you guys. I really need to charge my phone. It's at 11%.
Okay.
Thanks a
Bye-bye.
lot.
Bye.
See ya.
See ya.